new stove, so you can't make it. You can't make a new flame because you have the electric ignition. With a pilot light, it's much easier.
Not to make a new one. If just
I
take it
mean,
from, take it up.
making new one is a problem because you have a pilot light. With the new stoves, you don't have a pilot light, so making a new one is a big problem.
But you bring it from a different fire. You just take a stick of
Well,
match,
but you
whatever.
can't, I don't know, in the United States, you can't turn the gas off without going through the
Yeah, no,
ignition stage.
we have that problem. We have one of these new gas ranges where it's regulated. So what we did was my Chavrus Avram Nissen showed us how to turn off that function so that then it is like an old one. But yes, he's right. If it's got the automated function, so then you're problematic. You have a problem.
Okay, good night, everybody. Welcome. We're in Chav Beis Amud Beis, a few lines from the bottom, and that is Tvi Iboy Lahu. The subject was about being megamer, which means to burn the samim spices for the purpose of making a nice fragrance or for giving a fragrance to the kelim. And now the Gemara goes further to give a fragrance or some kind of a smell or a taste to food, and that should be more mutter. So it means to smoke. Rashi says it means to smoke it in the samim. So it seems that you take the besamim, whatever, some kind of spices, and you burn it. Shalom, shalom, welcome. And you burn it on whatever, a fire, coals, as we'll see. And then it gives a fragrance or a taste or smell into the food. So it's mutter to do that on Yom Tov. So the question here comes down to talking about Ochel Nefesh. Till now we weren't speaking about Ochel Nefesh maybe. But now that we're speaking about food, so what's the problem? So without Rashi, I wouldn't know how to figure this out. But Rashi says that there's a new issue about Shavuot L'chol Nefesh, which was mentioned earlier. It's based on the Gemara Ksubas Tav Zayin, and here the Gemara says over here that even by Ochel Nefesh also you must have Shavuot L'chol Nefesh, not only by the application of if it's not Hutra Shalol L'Tzorech Ochel Nefesh, even when it's Ochel Nefesh also you must have Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. And Rashi calls this Tafnuke Yisrael. This is some kind of extra delicacy to have this Ishun. Is it mutter if it's not Shavuot L'chol Nefesh? Rav says that it's considered an extra delicacy, and therefore it's also to do. And Shmuel says no, that people would do it. It seems everybody agrees to the Yisod that if it would be Mamash not Shavuot L'chol Nefesh, it would be Aser. But the question is something which people don't usually have, only a high class, but if they would get used to it, if they would be introduced to it, they also would like it. So Shmuel says that is good enough. Now, we're going to pass like Shmuel at the end, that even if there's something which is considered an extra delicacy, it's still considered mutter because really everybody would like it if they would know about it and be in that culture. They just have to be introduced. The rest of the Gemara now is going to discuss that even if there's a problem, there's a question about it's not Shavuot L'chol Nefesh, but first you have to talk about which malacha is being done. Which malacha is involved by being ma'ashen, these besamim, which malacha is involved that we have to talk about a heter, and this was the problem in the first place. So there are going to be a few issues over here. Because when you put the besamim onto the coals to start burning, so it extinguishes partly the coals. The coals get somewhat extinguished. Why did you say the problem about making a fire also? Because you're burning the besamim itself gets burned. So besides mechaber, there's also a mavir issue also. I agree, you have both problems. In the beginning, first you extinguish some of the fire, and then the fire overtakes and burns the besamim. So you have both problems. I didn't mean to say only mechaber; it's also mavir. So again, the Gemara is talking about according to Shmuel that says that it's mutter, even though it is mechaber, even though it is mavir, it's mutter because you're doing ochel nefesh. Rav holds that it's usher because since these issues are present, so it's not enough of a heter of ochel nefesh because it's not shavuot l'chol nefesh. It's not something everybody would want. So the Gemara is going to continue discussing what the problems might be if there had been no heter of ochel nefesh, which will sum up at the end. Rav Yudah al gabe gecheles aser. Top of the next page. Al gabe cheres mutter. Al gabe cheres mutter. Even though the problem we spoke about is only when it's a gacheles, when it's a coal, you're putting the besamim onto a coals. Then you have mechaber, then you have mavir. But if you put it onto a hot piece of cheres, you put it onto a hot piece of earthenware, the food that you want to be ma'ashen, you put the besamim onto cheres, which is hot. So then you don't have the problems of chaba and mavir. The process, but Rashi talks about maybe there is something getting burnt, but he says it says shinoi. Without Rashi, with the Chara, we would be able to say that there's no mavir over there. Maybe it doesn't get burnt. But Rashi says that the besamim does get burnt and still it's mutter because it's a shinoi. But gechelas would be also according to Rav. Rabbi Omar, al gabi cheres nami yasser mishum de kamolid recha. Now the Gemara introduces a third issue besides mechaba and mavir, but the molid recha, that you're making a reach in something which didn't have a reach before. Either the food, Rashi says it's going on the cheres itself. The cheres now gets kind of a fragrance or flavor that maybe it's going to help you next time you want to be ma'ashen other peiros. It's already pre-mivusam, it's pre-spiced. So therefore, that would be a reason also why it'd be also. So far, the Gemara said three issues that we're talking about when you mean ma'ashen peiros. One is machabe, extinguishing. One is ma'avir, burning, and one is making a reich. Those are the three issues that we're concerned with. Again, Shmuel said everything's mutter. I don't care about all these problems because it's all for chol nefesh. And Rab says that it's not a real chol nefesh because it's not shavu chol nefesh. The Gemara brings in another issue about.
We brought up the issue of being that it's a reich, so is that considered as a nefesh?
First, you have to talk about what the problem is. Then you have to talk about the heter of chol nefesh. So the person is doing it because he wants to eat it. He's eating it with a delicacy. That's the reason why he's doing it. But what's the issue involved? The issue would be either extinguishing the besamim, the fire, or lighting the besamim, or making a reach in the fruit or in the besamim. So that's the reason why there'd be a problem. Now, is there heter of chol nefesh? So Shmuel says yes. It's called chol nefesh. You're allowed to do all these things. And Rav says you're not allowed to because it's not a shavu chol nefesh. Even though it's doing it for food, but it's not shavu chol nefesh. Not everybody wants this delicacy. So therefore, according to Rav, it should be us. So the more to talk about the three issues that are present, the issues that we have to talk about. But even though you have all these issues, but if it's ochel nefesh, everything's mutter. And Rav says it's not enough ochel nefesh because it's not shavu ochel nefesh. The Gemara continues. Rav Yosef Damitava Yischufi Kasa Ashiroi B'Yom Tava Aser. My time Mishum the Kamol Recha. Interesting. And another application about making a reich in something, creating a reich in something. If you have a cup that has some kind of besamim that's already been a fragrant cup. However got the fragrance, maybe you put spices and cooked it inside, whatever the case might be. But now you want to take this cup and turn it over. Schufi kasa. Schufi means to turn over. Kasa means a cup. Ashiroi on. Usually I talk about silks. Shiroim is called silks. So you want to do that in order to give a fragrance into the silk garment by putting the fragrant cup over it. Yom Tov Aser. Why? You're making a reich in the garment. You're not allowed to be molded reich. The same thing would be about putting some kind of a fragrance, a spray onto clothing. You wouldn't be allowed. You wouldn't be allowed to do that. And the Gemara here is talking about food, and food is more mutter because it's ochel nefesh. Maybe it's not enough of a heter because it's not shavu l'chol nefesh. The Gemara continues. Top line on the screen. You're allowed to take something which is already detached, a plant, which is already hadassim, which are already detached from the ground, and you want to make a fragrance. And are you allowed to rub it between your fingers? Modelo means to rub it between your fingers. You're allowed to take a flower that's already detached from the ground, and just when it got to get out the smell, so you're allowed to rub it between your fingers. Also, kotmo, you're even allowed to break a piece off in order to make the smell come out. So how come over there you don't say there's a problem of making a reich? The answer is over there, the reich is there already. You're just adding on. By rubbing it between your fingers, you're bringing out the smell, but it's already there. But here you're inventing, you're bringing out for the first time, you're putting in a reich which wasn't there. So I think the pshat of the Gemara is that plant, whatever kind of plant that you're rubbing, the smell is there. It's inside someplace. It just isn't effusing. It's not coming out. But the reich is there. You're not putting it there for the first time. Even if you don't smell it at all. It's not just that you're adding on to make it smell more. Even if you didn't smell it at all, the fact that it's inside the plant, that's why it's mutter. You're just rubbing it in order to let it out. But when you put something onto the garment that the garment had no source of smell, you're putting it on from the cup, whatever the case would be, from the other source onto the beged. Now you're being molded reich, and that's why it should be an issue. The Gemara goes back to the subject about ishun. You're doing some kind of smoking food inside some kind of a fragrance, spices. So we said that there are three reasons why it should be asa. It means three issues to talk about: machabe or mavir or molded reich. And then the question was, is it considered ochel nefesh or not? Rav said it's not ochel nefesh because it's not shavu l'chol nefesh. Shmuel said that it is. The Gemara continues with that.
Rebbe, there's a very famous.
Just to finish the sugya, and then we'll open up. Rav Amar al Gabi Gechelis Nami Mutter Midi Dava Bisra Gumi. Rav calls like Shmuel. It's still continuing. Rav is not a new subject. Rav was talking about the subject before that it's mutter to put on top of the spices on top of a coal also, not only on the cheres, but even on top of the gechelis. Because even if you have all these issues of machaber and ma'avir, and also molded reach, all the problems, but he also like Shmuel that says that it's mutter because you find it by ochel nefesh. The way he says it is mitideva bisra gumi. Just when you put meat onto coals, also when the meat is dripping, you're roasting the meat on top of coals, so it drips onto the coals. The coals get a little bit extinguished. Also, the coals might be burning something over there, and besides the part that is going to cook, it's also going to burn, and also smolded reach into the coals. The coals also get a reach. The next time you're going to cook meat on it, you'll get it ready meaty. Even if you might cook something else on the coals, you'll get a meaty flavor because of the meat that came onto it, and still it's ochel nefesh, and therefore it's mutter. And the main point that the Chorah more is missing is what Rashi says that. In the case of Ishun Peiros is also considered ochel nefesh, which Bisra Gumri for sure is considered. Bisra means meat on Gumri is coals. That's surely mutter. You're doing it for the ochel nefesh. But here the question was that maybe it's not considered ochel nefesh because it's only delicacy. So Rashi says that's what it means to say, that it's just as much ochel nefesh as it is meat on the coals, and therefore it's mutter like Shmuel. The Gemara continues, Tarash. That's the machlokes. That's the machlokes. That's the machlokes. Rab says that it's a delicacy. It's not shavuot l'chol nefesh. Delicacy means that it's something. There are delicacies everybody would like, but there are delicacies that not everybody would like. The poor people, I don't know about fancy foods. That maybe some people they're not used to it. If you give it to them, they don't know what it is. So Rab says that's not called shavuot l'chol nefesh. Shmuel says it is, and the Pshat Shmuel is, even though right now they're poor. They never experienced it. Maybe you have to develop a taste. Sometimes you have to develop a taste for good food. So maybe that's called shavuot l'chol nefesh. Also, that's why we pass on like Shmuel, that even though you might say that not everybody has this delicacy, it's mutter also. The Gemara continues just to finish the sugya. Darash Rav Givia by Beit Kasil Pischa de Beibesh Galusa. Rav Givia from the place called Beit Kasil, he darshan by the doorway of the Reish Galusa the following drasha, 2 words. Keturah shari. Keturah is permissible. What's keturah? So the word keturah sounds a little bit like ketoras, like burning something. It also in Aramaic, keturah means to tie, kosher. So I wasn't sure, it wasn't clear what he was saying. What did he mean to say that this keturah is mutter? My keturah, what do you mean to say? Keturah bidi or biri ma'isumudu. If it means some kind of a tying, Rashi says there was some kind of a ribbon or a bow, some kind of a decoration, a decorative ornament, and if you tie it, so is that what he means to say that it's mutter on yantif? No, it's kosher. Ma'isuman, it's considered a professional thing. We had a Masechah Shabbos, they're making a knot, which is a professional knot, so it's also, so you shouldn't be making a lot of making knot on yantif. If the word means something about smoking, not about knots, the word keturah is Hebrew, not Aramaic, and it means smoking, and that's the subject we're talking about till now. Rav Shmuel also the Kamachaber. It should be also because you're doing a malacha, and he holds like Rav. It seems the most question how holds like Rav that it's also because you're doing malacha and it's not called shavuot l'chol nefesh. Ravashi lolam la'ashen. He did mean la'ashen, and the reason why it's mutter is like we said a second ago. Just like putting meat on the coals, also you have machaber and ma'avir and molded reach and still it's mutter because it's for ochel nefesh. It is also is considered ochel nefesh, even though it's a delicacy and not everybody would go for it. Maybe it's also considered shavuot l'chol nefesh. If they get used to it, they also would like it. You could have a little bit of a different version, but the same idea. The same question. What do you mean to say by keturah is mutter? The same thing. If it's making some kind of a knot, so then it's be also because it's a ma'isumun to make a knot. In the first version, it said because of machaber, and this version it says because molded reach. Both of them, we had all three issues already: machaber, ma'aver, molded reach. So he holds it should be also because it's not ochel nefesh, as Rab said that it's not called shavuot l'chol nefesh. I'm the one who told him. I told him via the Beit Kasil. I told him it in the name of a big man. It doesn't say in the Gemara who the big man is, but a great man. And it's true. Same as before, that it's mutter because just like you put meat onto the coals, you have these issues about machaber and molded reach, but it's still mutter because it's ochel nefesh. It's also considered ochel nefesh. So that's the end of the sugya, something which is considered a delicacy, and not everybody is used to it, even though it's not because of the expense. Not used to it in general. It's also mutter because it has to be shavuot l'chol nefesh. Just to point out again what we said, the psak should be everybody should agree that smoking nowadays is not shavuot l'chol nefesh, and therefore it's also to smoke on yantiv. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, so Rashi has a very Mishunadik lashon that my Chabrusa and I marked on the third line, which says Shelo haya boreach va'asim midrabanan, and then he says Shahamoili davar chadash karov hu la'asos malacha chadasha. And I noted that in Rabbi Rosner's share, he brought that apparently there's cross references in Rashi to another issue, which is making ice, and nolad, which is not molid. And I didn't understand it. So I was wondering if you had any comments on both Rashi's Lashon and the sushtel to ice.
The issue is molded, the issue is molded over there by the ice also. You can talk about it changing something. There's one issue called nolad, which is not us on Shabbos by us, only by Yantif. And molded means creating something. And like over here, that is called creating a smell. It's not a malacha, but it's like karv malacha. It's not enough to be asam rabbanan that you're creating something. And also over there, also, if changing a state from one, changing something from a solid to a liquid or vice versa, also might be considered that you're creating something. That's the issue they talk about over there. Okay, Yashikoach. And the next issue, the Mishnah said, it had a list of leniencies that Rabbi Gamliel said. The first one was about sweeping. On Yantif, we hold that it's also because you might level the ground. If you're talking about a place where there's earthen floors, so you're not allowed to sweep. Second thing was about making mugmar, which we said that we're talking about making mugmar in the house to make a fragrance, incense in the house. So it's also because it's not shavuot l'chol nefesh. It's not something everybody does. So therefore it's also. That's why you have to have shavuot l'chol nefesh. And now we're up to the third thing. The third thing was osin gedim mekulos. And on Pesach, they would make a gedim mekulos. Gedim mekulos means that there would be a goat or a sheep for that matter, that they would roast it whole the same way they would a korban Pesach. And the reason why they did it was they wanted to make a zecher of Pesach, even though it wasn't anymore the Beis Hamikdash, but they wanted to make a zecher, and that's a very nice thing to do zecher Hamikdash. We're doing it right now. That we're taking lulav all 7 days. Really, Allah is only lokatem lochem yom harishon. The reason why we're taking it is because Sion he dorish shein la pasuk in Yirmiyah, and he's supposed to be dorish Sion. So I think since we're in the middle of Sukkot now, just to remember that every time you take a lulav during the 7 days, besides the first day, the main kavanah is supposed to be the Rishas Tzion. You're trying to ask Hashem, please bring back the Beis Hamikdash. We should do the lulav again, the same way that they did in the Beis Hamikdash. So Zeichel HaMikdash is a very good thing, but sometimes it gets too far. They get so much Zeichel HaMikdash, they think it's a Mikdash already. And therefore, that's the problem with the karbanos over here, that they didn't mean to make a korban. A korban Pesach, you can't do a korban Pesach, it's kachim b'chutz. But they wanted to make a zecher, so let's make a whole roasted goat on a spit, the way they did in the Beis Hamikdash. But the problem is that it's going to take it too far. People will think that actually kachim. So that's what happened over here. So Gamliel held that you're allowed to, and the Chacham said don't do it. Tanya Abios Yom Tudis is Romi. There was somebody from Rome. His name was Tudis. The one says he was a chashav man. He made a custom in Rome. He lived in Rome, and he said that they should do this. Gedim Mekulas as a zecher for the korban Pesach. They should make this. The Rashi says the word Mekulas means like a helmet. The fact that they had the goat with the intestines that were wrapped around the head, the way they did by the korban Pesach. So he made that custom that they should have a zecher for korban Pesach. But the Chachamim sent to him, if you wouldn't be such a chashva person to this, like as you are, we would make chayrim, because you're doing a bad thing. You'd be eating Am Yisrael, kachim, karbonis, outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara jumps up, kachim, you mean to say it wasn't kachim, no one is makdash it, no one made it should be a korban Pesach. Something similar. People are going to get the idea, they're going to start calling it a korban Pesach, and they're going to think that you're making a korban. That's a dangerous thing. It's high courage to do korbanos out of the Beis Hamikdash. Someone just mentioned to me that nowadays also they have a custom before Pesach to show people what a korban Pesach is supposed to look like. So in certain places they make that, they do it. So sometimes people start talking about when are they doing the korban Pesach? When is it, which day is going to be the korban Pesach? So that's a dangerous thing. If people start calling it a korban Pesach, who knows what's going to happen? So you have to make sure they call it the drill, the targilim, but don't call it a korban Pesach. So that's a good thing of making a zechel mikdash and to want the korban Pesach back and want the Beis Hamikdash. But you have to make sure that you don't go past the red line, that it shouldn't become too serious. You shouldn't think that it's actual. So we finished that Mishnah. I mentioned the three coolest, but all those three things we passed like to have one against Rabbi Gamliel. You're not allowed to sleep in the earthen floor, even on Yantif, and you're not allowed to do something which is not shavuot l'chol nefesh. Even if it's ochel nefesh, it has to be shavuot l'chol nefesh. We had a machlokes Rav Shmuel today, a delicacy which people are not used to. Shmuel says is also considered shavuot l'chol nefesh, but if it's not shavuot l'chol nefesh, like smoking, then it's surely aser. And the third thing was not to do a gedim mekulas on Pesach, not to make a zechel Pesach with a whole roasted goat. There's a custom the Mishnah talks about in Psachim that the Ashkenazim don't even eat any kind of roasted meat, not even a whole goat, even a piece of meat. But here it's talking about that it's a whole goat roasted, so that's not a minhag, that's also minhag. Next Mishnah, once we talk about leniencies in Yantif, so we have now a new Mishnah, Shlosha Dvarim of Elazar ben Azariah, Mativ, Chacham, and Moshe. There are three things that Elazar ben Azariah holds is permissible, about Hilchas Yantif, and the Chacham say that it's Aser. The first one was, Barasa Yosef B'Rasuah Ben Karnel. This has to do with what we had in Masechah Shabbos, and here the question was if it's Shabbos or Yantif. I said Yantif, that's how people learn. There are some that learn like that, some say Shabbos, that his cow would go out with a ribbon. So we had the Masechah Shabbos, B'Amer Be'im Mayotze, there's a whole parak over there. What are the animals allowed to go with his gear? What is it allowed to wear? So it's allowed to wear things, but it's not allowed to carry. It's also for an animal to carry for you. On Shabbos, of course, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to carry also, but surely the animal's allowed to. But if it's only an issue about carrying, but there might be an issue called the Shvisas Behemto, I'm not sure. But they talk about Yom Tov also. But let's talk about Shabbos first. That a ritzua, a ribbon, if you do it in order that you're able to hold on to it, it should be a leash or something like that, then it might be permissible in the case we have to watch over the cow in a way with a leash. But here they did it just for decoration. You're allowed to put a decorative ribbon on an animal. Or not. So he held it's permissible, and his cow would go out with Ritzua Shebei Karnel, permissible. And the Rabbanan said you're not allowed to because it's considered carrying. Maybe this is Shvisas Behemto also. Second thing that he was lenient, we allowed to comb the animal. So if Moshe will talk about different kind of combs, sometimes the combs made a chabura when you would be combing the animal, whatever you did it for, to get the fleas off, whatever the case would be. But sometimes it would make a chabura, make a wound, and that would be a problem on Yantif, on Shabbos. So he said that that's permissible on Yantif, that you'd be allowed to comb the animal, and he wasn't concerned about making a wound. And the third thing is, we're going to talk about Davar Shem Eskaven. Since it's not your intention, it's called Davar Shem Eskaven. So that's why Elazar ben Azariah was matir. He was like a Shimon, who was later generation than him. He was the source of the sugya of Davar Shem Eskaven his mutter. The third thing is v'shochkin as a pilpul in berchaim shalahen. You'd be allowed to grind shochek, to grind peppers in their grinder. So this came up a couple of days ago when we spoke about pounding spices and things like that. So I think Manuel brought out that nowadays the only thing we have left of these kind of grinding in the house is only when they have a pepper grinder. People want to grind fresh pepper straight onto the food. So is that mutar and yantif? So here it seems to be a Mishnah about it, and the Mishnah before seemed to speak about the dach, to be pounding, and there seems to be two stages. One is to pound, and that you have a mortar and a pestle, and usually the way is to use a madoch shel even, and shinu is to use one made out of wood, and then there's another kind of even a bigger shinu, and over there we pass like Beis Hillel, the hells you don't need a shinu. You're allowed to do all kinds of tavlinim, but here it seems about the second stage is about to be shochek to make it even finer. And the way we do it nowadays, probably the one that they sell that you were talking about, pepper grinder, probably it does it right away. It does everything. It doesn't have two stages. It just grinds it into a powder. So here, Elazar ben Azariah said you're allowed to do it, and Rabbanan say you're not allowed to do it. So Allah L'chara, this case of the pepper grinder, and the Mishnah Berurah says also a coffee grinder, even if it's going to be a manual one. So it's Asa Yantif, and the reason doesn't say why. Why is it Asa? So there are two reasons brought down in the Mefarshim why it might be Asa, and either Uvda the Chol, it's considered 2 weekdays, and the other reason is because maybe this is considered so much the derech that it's considered maybe the deraisa even of tochen. So therefore, you're not supposed to use you could take a mortar and pestle if you want to grind your coffee, not in the regular way. No one does that usually. But if you have a coffee grinder, even if you're going to have a manual coffee grinder with Sasa and Yantif, and the pepper grinder also, we pass like the Rabbanan, you do pass like the Rabbanan against Sasa. So we had the three cases over here, the three leniencies of Elazar ben Azariah. One was that he held that a cow, an animal, is allowed to go out with a decorative ribbon. And the second thing is that you're allowed to comb the animal, even though it might make a chabura, a wound, because Davar Shem Eskaven is mutter. And the third thing is that he held that you're allowed to grind pepper in the regular or normal way, but they want to say sasa either because of the chol, or that's considered a regular malacha of grinding. It's too much mamish grinding. The Mishnah goes back to the second issue about combing the animal. He agrees to what the Tana said before, that you're not allowed to be mekared. It's kind of a comb. It's a kind of, the Gemara is going to say that it's a kind of a comb that could make a wound, but mekarsifin is a different kind of a comb that has more dull teeth in a way that it's impossible to make a wound, so therefore it's permissible. But the Chacham and Mamach even more than Rabbi Yehuda, the Chacham and Mamach ain't mekared and aflo mekarsifin. You're not allowed to even do it with a comb that's definitely not going to make a wound. And I think Morris going to explain if you can use this kind of comb, you might use other kind of comb also, and that already is going to be awesome. If it's possible to up, okay. Where are we again? Yeah. Okay, so back to the Mishnah. We had the Mishnah and the middle issue about coming down. Well, that's the Dov Shem Eskaven, and the Mishnah that says that Asasar is because Dov Shem Eskaven is Asar, but Elazar ben Azariah held Dov Shem Eskaven is Mutter. And then there was Machlokes also about the kind of a comb that's impossible to make any kind of a wound, so surely should be Mutter. There might be a Xera about this kind of comb because of the other kind of comb. If you use the permissible comb, you might come to use the prohibited comb. The Gemara goes to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Mishnah said about the first issue about his cow went out with a decorative ribbon. It sounded like he had one cow. The Gemara said Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had one cow. The member there, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he had one cow. Place Alfi Egli have been Master Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Medre called Shata B'Shata. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used to give the Meiser alone, the tithing alone would be 13,000 calves. So that means that each year was born 130 new calves. There, you don't want he has one cow. Sounds like he has one cow with a ribbon. He had 130 new cows every year. He was a rich 130,000. I made a mistake. 130,000 new calves every year. He's very rich. Rabbi Elazar was very rich. So that you don't talk about one cow. The Gemara says you're right. That wasn't his cow. Tana lo shelo hoisa elo shel shchenaso hoisa umitov shelo micha bo nikris al shmo. It wasn't his cow. His cow he didn't put ribbons on, but his neighbor had a cow. One poor neighbor had one cow, and she put a ribbon, a decorative ribbon, and he didn't tell her not to do it. And it's very interesting. It's nikris al shmo. It's called that he did it. And means because he holds that as permitted. He didn't tell her not to do it because he holds that as permissible. Jabbanan say that it's asur. And interesting, Yerushalmi over here, the Yerushalmi says that he did a big tshuva, the fact that he didn't protest, and he fasted very many Tanais until his teeth became black from fasting. And it's an amazing thing because he, first of all, wasn't his own, it was his neighbor's, and he holds that as mutter. But he should have protested because the Rabbanan hold that it's asur, so he's supposed to decline to the Rabbanan. And since he didn't protest on the neighbor who did it permissibly according to him, so he fasted many fasts for the tshuva that he made such a mistake. But we pass like to Rabbanan that the Noi Behem is us. You're not supposed to put things that are only decoration, only if it helps them to be for the Shmira, to be able to protect them, that they shouldn't get lost. So then you're allowed to
Rebbe,
for decorative reasons. Yes, please.
what really bothers me about this sugya is what is his place in the Kehila? Is he considered Gadol Ador or is a posek or what? Why is it dafka on him? Because you have this sugya like in Shabbos on Nun Hey, Tosfos, where it says that if you could be micha and there's any chance moicha that they hear you and you don't do it, you're responsible. But here, who is this person?
There's a woman neighbor, Shechina, so his woman neighbor, and if he passed by and tell her that you shouldn't put a decorative ribbon on Shabbos, she would listen to him. What's the issue? Why shouldn't she listen to him? If he would tell her you're not allowed to do it, so she would have listened, but he didn't tell her not to, and that's pointing out he holds really that it's permissible. But since the Rabbanan hold that it's asur, he should have declined to them, and he should have told them that you're not allowed to do that because the Rabbanan say that it's asur.
Yeah, but is his status like a Morad Asra? What is this man's status?
I don't see the kasha. Anybody that if you pass by your neighbor and you tell you're not allowed to do that, so why shouldn't she listen? At least that's sad that she might listen. Why are you taking it that she definitely would not have listened? Tais over there talks about a case where you know for sure the person's not going to listen. What do you see in the case over here? She's, Elazar ben Azariah, the woman neighbor, why shouldn't she listen to him? If he would say that you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos, so she would take off the ribbon.
So your point is that this applies to everyone, not dafka, a rich person, lav dafka, a rabbi, anybody.
You talk about the halacha, anybody that might listen to you, you're supposed to tell them if they're doing an avera. they're doing something wrong, you're supposed to tell them. Of course, you have to figure out how to do it in a way that should be acceptable, but you have to, why not? And many people do listen. Many people do listen. They say, thank you for, I didn't know that. It depends how you say it sometimes. And some people don't listen, okay, but if you have a suffix, they might listen, so you're supposed to say. Tana Rabbanan, Ezeu Kirud, so we said that this issue about the comb, and you might make a chabur, you might make a wound in the animal, but you're combing it, you don't mean to, but it's Dav Shem Miskavan, is that mutter asa. Tana Rabbanan, Ezeu Kirud, Ezeu Kirud. So if the Mishnah says two kinds of combs, what are they? Kirud, Ketan, and Bosa Chabura, Kirtz of Gedol, and Veinos the Chabura. The kirud has fine teeth, and therefore it could make, it doesn't mean it's definitely, it means that it might make a wound. The Kirtzov is big teeth, and therefore it's surely not, it's impossible to make a wound. And therefore, that's why the Mishnah differentiates between the two. And the Mishnah explains now, Gimel Machlokes B'Dava, there are three opinions in our Mishnah. The Avidah Sava, Dav Shein Miskavan Asa. Avidah is the big sheet that always holds that you're not allowed to do something which might happen, even though it's not your intention. Dav Shein Miskavan is Asa. Miyu Kiwud Ketan and Bosa Chabura, Kirsav Gedol, and Veinos Chabura. But it's only Asa, even though Dav Shein Miskavan is Asa, it's only if it's possible that it might make a wound. So therefore, the small teeth one, that's called kirud, that's aser. But the kirtzav, which is big teeth, so it's no possibility to make a wound, so then it's mutter. The logas win on kirtzav to kirud. Now we don't make xera to aser the big teeth comb because of the small teeth. But Rabbanan, they mach even more than Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbanan Savi, now make Rabbi Yehuda, Dav Shem Miskavan aser. In that part they agree, Dav Shem Miskavan is aser, so the small teeth comb is aser, but they even goes in more, guys. We don't kirtzav to kirud. That if you're going to use the big teeth comb, the dull teeth, they're going to come to use the other one also, so they asked everything. But our Mishnah, Elazar ben Azar, he says that it's mutter. Why? Because he holds Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. So even though it's possible that it might make a wound, we're still not concerned. First white line, but Elazar ben Azar, Yisrael Alav Krav B'Shimon, and Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter, and therefore it's mutter. Dav Shem, the Ben Kiwud, Ben Kiwud, so for Shari, because even if it might make a wound, but it's still Dav Shem Miskavan and it's mutter. And this is the famous shita of Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. And the whole Shas always talks about Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon knows Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. Really, so Elazar ben Azariah, who's a generation or two before him, and he's the source who said Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. And our Mishnah argues with him, Rav Yehuda, and we're going to pass him like Rav Elazar ben Azariah. Second white line, Rav Nachman Am Shmuel, Rav Nachman Uchudei. It seems Rav Nachman without Shmuel. Either Shmuel said it or Rav Nachman said it. Allah Rav Shimon. But here it says Allah Rav Shimon. You know why? Sharei Rav Elazar ben Azariah Model. Who's Rav Shimon? Rav Shimon is the famous one. Talks about dragging a chair across the yard in a way that you might make a charitz, but you're not doing it for the charitz, but it might happen. So he says it's mutter. Rav Yehuda says that it's aser. Here it says that Rav Nachman or Shmuel said Allah Rav Shimon because Rav Elazar ben Azariah holds like him. Our Mishnah, a couple of generations earlier, Rav Elazar ben Azariah said Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. You're allowed to comb the animal even though it might make a wound. Rav Nachman, is that a reason to pass like Rav Shimon because Rav Elazar ben Azariah holds like him? On the contrary, in our Mishnah, it should come out Rav Elazar ben Azariah is going to lose against the Chachamim. The Chachamim is the Rabbim, they pass against Rav Elazar ben Azariah. So if you want to have you want to derive from our Mishnah who to pass like Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon. On the contrary, you should have said Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda because the Chachamim hold like him that Ashad Dav Shem Miskavan is aser. Amalei, Anak Rav Shimon's freely. So he explained that only to say I pass like Rav Shimon because of Elazar ben Azariah. You're right. If my whole source would only be one of the earlier generations hold, then I would pass him Dav Shem Miskavan is aser. I hold like Rav Shimon, and I'm also saying you should know Elazar ben Azariah also is like that. Oh, Sharei Elazar ben Azariah model, but not that that's the source. And you're right. If I wouldn't have my own opinion, I would pass him like the Chachamim. But I have my own opinion, and I'm just pointing out that also Elazar ben Azariah. So in the whole Shas, whenever we say the Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter, that's the halacha. You also have to remember that there's also Elazar ben Azariah, is also the Balashita, and that's how we pass in. To turn the page, the Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. You definitely allowed to comb the animal with a comb that might make a wound, but you don't want it to. Therefore, it's aser. Tosfos points out that if it's a psik resha, if it's definitely going to make a wound, then it's aser. That's halacha also. So, and right. That's true. This Mishnah had three leniencies. 2 out of 3 were going to be machmir like the Rabbanan, but the middle one we passed like Elazar ben Azariah. The middle one, top one was about, I forgot already. What was the first one? With the animal going with a decorative ribbon, passed like Rabbanan, you're not allowed to. And the last one that you're not supposed to use a pepper grinder. But in the middle one, about combing, so we passed like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rav Shimon, the Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. Unless it's going to be a psik resha, if it's definitely so. Same thing with hair, combing hair, not an animal, but by a person. If it might take out some hairs, that's permissible. Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter. But if it's a psik resha, then it's aser. If it's definitely going to pull out hairs, then it's aser. But if it might tear out hairs, or doesn't, if you have a brush that doesn't,
I've never seen a hair on it.
then it's only mutter. But even if it, then yes, but even if it sometimes takes out hairs, but not always, also it would be mutter. Okay, the next one with base now. Mishnah. Once we spoke about a pepper grinder, so we're more Mishnah, not a Mishnah about it, not to get Hilchos Yontif, but like once we're speaking about it, so it comes in as a tangent. But it has 3 parts to it, and it's considered 3 kelim. Rashi says that even if one of them breaks, it's still considered a kli. And Taisus points out that even if one part becomes tamei, the other ones don't, because they're considered 3 individual parts. And the Mishnah explains, Mishum kli kibul, Mishum kli mataches, and Mishum kli kvora. It has a receptacle. That's a kli kibul, and also it has a metal kli. Means a metal kli doesn't have to be a receptacle. If it's metal, even if it doesn't have, even shutik lemateches also is mikabel tuma. It's vulnerable to tuma, even if it doesn't have any receptacle. But a kli eitz, something made out of wood, does have to have a receptacle in order to be tamei, and it has both of them over here. And also mishum kli kvara, which means it's a sifter. But so some more or less, just the 2 lines in the Gemara. Tana tachtona mishum kli kibul, and Mtsaras mishum kli kvara, and Alyona mishum kli matachetz. The bottom one is the receptacle, the middle one is the sifter, and the top one is the metal one. So it seems, I don't know exactly how it looks, but the general idea we get that there's a grinding part, that's the metal, and that's tamei, even though it doesn't have a base kibul, it doesn't have any receptacle, but a metal kli is tamei, even if it not like a metal knife is tamei, even if you have a wooden knife, let's say, so then it wouldn't be mikabel tamei because it doesn't have a receptacle. But a metal is tamei even if it's pshutik lei mateches. So the top, the blade is mikabel tamei. Then there's also the middle. The middle is we have some kind of a sifter because it seems that even after you grind it, there's a psolus, there's some kind of some part. I'm not sure about our pepper grinders, but there might be a psolus which has to be separated, and therefore they make a sifter in which only the powder is going to go through, but the psolus is going to stay back. And Taisha says that's also considered a clay kibul. And the bottom one where it catches all of the pepper powder that you want to use. So that is the kli kibul, and even if it's made out of wood, it's also going to become tamei. Rashi says a little different about the sifter part. Rashi says it's called a different reason why it should become tamei. But Taisha has a problem with Rashi, and he says that the kli kvara, besides sifting, the sifter is also that it holds back something. What is a sift? Part goes through, one part stays back. The part that is holding back, that's also considered a clay kibul. It's a receptacle, but it also has tumah. And Taisha says that each kli is considered a kli on its own, and therefore, even if one became tamei, the other one doesn't necessarily become tamei. It's three in one, but it's not considered dafka one that if part of it becomes tamei, the other one also does. Taisha says in comparison to a scissor is they use it in unison. You can't use one without the other. So if one part of the scissor becomes tamei, the whole thing becomes tamei. It's considered one unit. But over here, there are 3 separate issues of this 3-in-1 package. You have a grinder, and then you have a sifter, and then you have a receptacle. So it's considered 3 kelim. That was Agav. We spoke about a pepper grinder. We said something about Hilchos Tumah. And now the last Mishnah of the Perek, Agola Shel Katan. So Rashi, so Taisus, let's say Taisus is easy over here. Taisus doesn't mean what we call a walker. That when a child learns how to walk, so he has something on wheels. Or that doesn't say the wheels. Now we do it with wheels. That's something that he should be able to walk along with. It teaches him to walk. So the tells you about that. It's going to cut Hilchos Yontif for Shabbos here also. Agola Shel Katan Tmei Medris. First of all, it's considered that the katan is leaning on it. Medris means something that you lean on, either shoes or something you sit on, something you lay on. All those things are considered tamei medris. So the chiddush here is that since even though no one's sitting mamish, nowadays could be they make the walker that the kid sits on side. They have a walker that he's sitting in it and he just moves his feet. But the old-time walker, maybe it works better, maybe it teaches better, that he's not sitting in it, he just holds onto it and he pushes it as he goes along. So that's enough considered leaning on it that it's also considered tamei medris. Medris means it's negea for a zav. There are certain kinds of tumah that are only vulnerable to the tumah, to that level of tumah, only if it's considered something that you step on or lean on or sit on or lie on. So this is considered also that the katan leans on it. You tell us b'Shabbos it's not muktzah, and I don't know what the chiddush is. Why should it be muktzah? It's a kli. So I'm not sure what the chiddush is, but Rashi and Taish would say that it's a kli, so it's not muktzah. So the Gemara is going to say so. I'm not sure what the chiddush is over there. And the third thing is Einin Negeres Ela Gabi Kelim. Tanna Kama says you're not allowed to drag it on the floor. It means you can't use it. The katan probably that wants to use it, or the katan or the adult can't use it in a place where it might make a charitz. It might make a ditch in the floor, and something that he doesn't mean to do it, but it might happen. Back to the issue of Dov Shem Eskaven. Again, another too much nice in a row. Before we spoke about combing the animal, then we speak about dragging something on the floor. So he says that it might make a charitz, and therefore you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. But Rav Yehuda says Even the Abud is really the mandam that usually says that Hashem is kavan is asa. But here again, he says it's not a problem. Abud Omer, kalim mainly grown. I agree that other kalim are not allowed to be dragged on the floor because man make a charitz. But this thing of the agala, chutz min agala, but this wagon, this kind of walker is permissible, but bnei shiko beshes, because it doesn't make, it's not choretz. It doesn't make a groove. It just presses down. It means it has, I think the point that it has wheels. Before I said I wasn't sure if it has wheels. The Gemara says it has wheels. Or the Pshat, the Rashi says that it has wheels, and when you move it, it's true that it makes a groove, but the groove is by pressing down. And pressing down, that's not going to be considered choresh. It's not considered that you're plowing because you're not overturning you're not plowing because you're just pressing it down. So he says, I hold that Hashem is Gavan Azasa. Here's not a problem, because even if it does make a groove, it's going to be doing it by pressing down there. That's not considered making a groove. And therefore, it's permissible even in contact with the whole Hashem is Gavan is Asa. The Gemara explains the Mishnah. The first point the Mishnah said is that it's Tamim Medrash, yes, because the katan leans on it. That's what it's made for. He walks with it, he leans on it. The second thing is, it tells for Shabbos why, that it's considered a kli. The fact that, I don't know if that's a chiddush, that you might think that the walker is something to teach somebody to walk is not considered a kli. The chiddush is it is, and therefore it's not muktzah, and you're allowed to pick it up on Shabbos. Why is that? That you have to put it on something. On a kli means something that's not going to make a groove in it. And the Mishnah Gemara explains, what does that mean? Only on kelim, not on karka. Why? My timer, the kavet charitz, because it might make a groove. If you're going to drag it on the floor, it does make a groove. The Gemara knows that this doesn't necessarily happen, only sometimes it happens. So it means that Yehuda must be the author that holds the Dav Hashem is Kavan is Aser, because according to Rabbi Shimon, it should be mutter. The Rabbi Shimon, Dav Hashem is Kavan is mutter. How do we know it's Machlokes Rabbi Shimon? A famous brisa, the Tanya. Rabbi Shimon Omer, go rather meet the kids to the Sapsa, the bachelor is Kavan Lasas Chavi. It's not a Mishnah, but it's a brisa that says that Rabbi Shimon holds that a person is allowed to drag a bed, a chair, a bench, even on the ground where it might make a charitz, it might make a groove, as long as it doesn't have attention for that. That's called Dav Hashem is Kavan. If holds that as mutter, Abud holds that as asa. So this Mishnah that said that you're not allowed to put the walker, drag the walker on the ground, only on the kli, is because Dav Hashem is Kavan is asa. But Abud himself in the Mishnah said that it's mutter. Ema Sefer, Abud says that it's mutter. Abud Omar Ena Kol Nigroin. A little bit different guess than our Mishnah. He says that it's mutter because it presses down. It doesn't make a charis, it just presses down. That's the reason why it's mutter. So who's the Mishnah that says that it's aser? Even Rabbi Yehuda, who's the machmir, says Hashem is kavan is aser. He also holds that you're allowed to make the groove with agala because it's just pressing down. It's not digging up. The Gemara answers straight to no, both of these Tanoim hold like Abud Hashem is Kavan is Asa, but they're arguing if they might make a charitz. Rashi explains that it has a wheel. You're right. If they have a wheel, so there's no problem about making a charitz. It just presses it down. But sometimes the wheel gets stuck, as we know, even in our modern days. Also, sometimes the wheel gets stuck, and then it is going to make a charitz. If it's not going to be turning, it's just going to be stiff. So then it is going to make a charitz. So therefore, one the Tana was machmir even more than Rabbi Yehuda and said that Dav Hashem is Kavan is Aser, and here Choshesh the wheel might get stuck and it's going to make a charitz.
The lines that the wheels make, the going through, is that called?
No, that's not that. No, that's what we're saying. That first of all, it's okay. It's definitely going to make even if it's definitely. But it says it's not called choresh because it's just pressing it down. That's not a problem. We don't care about that. So that's the end. That's the end of the parak, and we'll stop here for today. And that's the end of the parak. Finish the second parak, and just to review the highlights of today's sugya. The first thing was about Ivmai Ochel Nefesh. You have to have Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. It has to be something which most people would do. All people would do. Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. And there was machloks about a delicacy that not everybody's used to. Rav said that it's Aser, it's not Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. And you have all the problems over there. Machab, Maver, Molid Reach. And Shmuel holds that that's also right for everybody. You just have to get used to it. But even if you're not used to it, but it's also called Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. After that, inside in the discussion, the Gemara spoke about Molid Reach. And it came out over there. We'll see later on the Gemara that says you're allowed to rub between your fingers a plant. Of course, it's detached from the ground. And just to bring out the smell, if you have adasim and things like that, you're allowed to roll it in order to make the smell, even cut off a piece in order to make the smell come out because it's already there. The smell is inside. You just have to bring it out. But something which doesn't have a smell, it has to be molded reach, as Rashi says, because it's molid, and it's like you're creating something new, and that's also. The next Gemara spoke about the Gedima Kulos, which ended the Mishnah, that on Pesach, the Paskin is not supposed to make a whole roasted goat. There's a minhag even not to have any kind of roasted meat brought down in the Mishnah, which Ashkenazim have that minhag. I think Sephardim also, maybe Temanim. I think the Yemenites do eat roasted meat, but they're also not allowed to have a whole roasted goat like they have in the Beis Hamikdash. That they shouldn't become to eat kosher b'chutz.
I always think about him playing, and I just think how petty it is.
Right, she needs a refresh layman. Yeah. Right?
After that, the Mishnah spoke about three things that were Elazar ben Azariah's matter. We're going to pass like him by one of them, but not by the other two. The first one was about if the cow was allowed, animals allowed to go out with a ribbon for noi, for beauty, and we hold that you're not allowed to. And the second issue was about Dav Shem Miskavan, which we hold as mutter. So you're allowed to come an animal if it might make a wound, since it's not definitely going to make a wound. Dav Shem Miskavan like a Shimon. And he was mutter to also use some kind of a pepper grinder, but we hold that as sasser. The Mepharshim say either because of the chol or that it's real tochen, it might even be a daraisa. And the Mishnah says that applies also to coffee, so you should not use a coffee grinder, of course, electric not. But even if it's a manual one, like the old time coffee grinder, is also not for Yom Tov. If you want to grind coffee, so get a mortar and pestle, and over there you could grind coffee beans. That's mutter. We mentioned Agav that Rav Elazar ben Azariah, he didn't only have one cow; he had 130,000 new cows every year. But he didn't protest for his neighbor who let her animal go with a decorative ribbon, and he holds that as mutter, but the Chum hold that as sasser, and he should have declined to Rabbanan. The Rishonim says he fasted many fasts in order to have tshuva for that mistake. We talked about the two kinds of combs, that if it's a kind of comb that can't make a wound at all, then even a Buddhist matter. But there are one who even matter on that because a gzeira, one comb matter, the other comb, we pass like a Shimon, that holds Dav Shem Miskavan is mutter, and even the comb which could make a wound is also permissible. Tyson points out that if it's a sekresha, then it's surely also. I'm not sure if it's still connected to the, but okay, well, it was here. And we should also talk about.
Very nice. Enjoy. Have a good Yom Tov. And Shabbat Shalom.
Okay.
Rebbe, one thing about a mortar and pestle, the actual pula, when you use a mortar or pestle, it grinds just like anything else. It makes a full toichen. Why is it then different?
In the Mishnah, there's one thing called dicha, dalet chaf. Another one is called shchika, dach, and shochek. The one Shabbos is mashma that shochek is finer, it seems. But as far as the poskim go over here, so they say that dach is mutter, and they say that you're allowed to use the mortar and pestle on tavlinin, something which is not going to be as fresh if you use it the day before, like Amor said before. And that includes the tavlinim, and also it seems that the pilpulin and the coffee, that's what people do it. They want to have it on the spot, that it should be fresh. So you're allowed to do it on Yontif. With a mortar and pestle, you could do it, kedarko, but shochakin is our Mishnah. There seems to be that shochakin either over the chol, which I can't say I understand why this is more over the chol than the other, but this is considered 2 weekdayish, or the Mishabur says maybe this is considered mamish, the malach of tochen, and that's why it's asa. I'm not saying what it says, that's the best that I got of the understanding. But you would be allowed to use a mortar and pestle for your coffee. If you want to make fresh coffee on Yantif, so you get a mortar and pestle, even a kedarko, you're allowed to do that. The next Mishnah spoke about Agav, about the Rechaim Shel Pilpulin, this pepper grinder, that it has 3 kalim, the blade, which is a klimateches, the bottom, which is considered a kli kibul, even if it's made out of wood, it's mekabel tumah because it has a receptacle, and the sifter in between that separates it is also, Taisa says, it's considered a kli kibul, the fact that it holds back the psolos from falling in. Taisa says if one part becomes tummy, not necessarily does the other, they're considered 3 separate kalim. The next Mishnah talks about also Agav and Yanim, about a galah shel katan. The main issue we're talking about if you like drag it on the floor on Shabbos Yantiv, so that's the machlokas of Dav Shem Miskavan, and we pass Dav Shem Miskavan as mutter, as long as it's not definitely going to make a charitz. Here it's even more lenient. The Reader also is that it's mutter, even though it might make a charitz, according to Reader should be yasser, but it presses down, and pressing down is not considered a charitz, and it's mutter. They brought those that were machmer even more. They said maybe this wheel is going to get stuck, and it's going to make a charitz, so they asked that also, but according to Allah, it's mutter. The Mishnah also mentioned that it's tummy medris because the katan leans on it, and it seems even though it doesn't sit on it, he's just leaning on it. That's also considered enough to be tummy medris, and it's not considered muktzah. That the is no chiddush. Maybe the chiddush is that it's considered a kli, even though it's just teaching him how to walk. That's enough. That's enough to be considered a kli. And that's the end of the parak. And Bez Hashem on Motzei Shabbos. What time are we starting?
So we started
8:30.
If you want to go to 8:15, or you want to?
Does everybody want to start 8? Let me just take this off a second. Does everyone want to start at 8:15?
Shabbos is going to be over like 7:15. So.
Shabbos is over 7:15. Does everyone want to start 8:15? Is it good for everybody? If they're going once, going twice, 3 times. If there's no veto, so 8:15. Okay. The Motzei Shabbos, 8:15. Okay. Going once, going twice. 8:15. Yashkoach, everybody. A good Shabbos and a good Moed. It should be happy for everybody.
Good Moed, good Moed.
Thank you. Yashikoach, thank you.
Can make it, Willie?